Good morning and afternoon, everyone. I'm Ben. I'm the Episcopal Chaplain at the U of A, and I'm really happy to introduce all of you to my amazing Bishop, Jennifer Reddall. And I think the key thing as we go into this, and what I hope, I'm assuming she's bringing to all of us today, is what she's been giving to our diocese over the past months, which is that what we are continuing to do is gathering for abundant life and figuring out how we're going to continue to gather for abundant life no matter what is happening in our greater context. And so thank you all for having our Bishop Jennifer with us today. And Jennifer, please share us your wisdom.
Cool. Hi. So yeah, I'm Bishop Jennifer Reddall, and I am here as a bishop. I am no longer the youngest bishop in the Episcopal Church. Dion Johnson just dethroned me, which I'm really happy about. So now I get to be old and sage and full of wisdom, I guess, for a while. So when I was, they were like, do a talk about what the future's like. And I'm like, I feel like my entire life right now and my entire ministry is dedicated to guessing what the future is like, and guessing what's going to happen and consistently being wrong. But as I was reflecting on it, one of the things that sort of came to me as I looked up from my desk where I am right now, and I looked over at my wall where I have, I'm an Episcopal clergy person, so I have like icons and beautiful quotes and things. But one of them is the Serenity Prayer. And it's a Brother Roy Parker calligraphed version of the Serenity Prayer that I got at Holy Cross Monastery in the fall of 1997 when I went on my very first retreat ever. And I was just joined the Episcopal Urban Intern Program, which is now an Episcopal Service Corps program. And I saw this, and I didn't know the connection of the Serenity Prayer to AA or 12-step programs. I just read it and knew that this was something that I needed to have in my life. And so the whole prayer is, God grant me serenity to accept what cannot be changed, courage to change what can be changed, and wisdom to distinguish the one from the other, living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, as the pathway to peace, taking as God does the world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that God will make all things right if I surrender to the divine will. So the first part of it, I think, are really familiar to people, serenity, courage, wisdom. But the rest of the prayer, I think maybe we don't pay as much attention to, which is the living the one day at a time and taking the world as it is and not as I want it to be. And so, I've looked at this prayer now for like 23 years every day. And I feel like I understand it more and more and still get confused by it. And it has some of the elements that we're in right now of like, what are the things that we cannot change and we have to have serenity about? And what are the things that we can change and we need to have courage about? And how do we have the wisdom then to figure out which is which? In this moment, racism is something we can change. We need to lose our serenity about racism. And we need to find our courage about racism and dismantling racism. We also need wisdom to figure out where the places are that we can change racist attitudes and racist systems. And what are the places where redemption or reformation or repentance and conversion is possible? And what are the places where it's not, and it just has to be torn down and either rebuilt in some completely different way, or we discover that we didn't need it after all? COVID-19 is probably something where I think we need to find some serenity on how to live with a virus that we can't change. The virus shows us for real in these huge and really universal ways just how powerless we are. It also exposes to some extent what power we do have, or we could have, to mitigate the effects of the virus if we were willing to do so. Speaking from Arizona, we're number one in new cases of the virus. But I think the reason that some parts of our nation and our culture want to just pretend that the virus has gone away or doesn't exist or is a hoax and is not a threat is that it makes us feel so very powerless. You know, we cannot control the spread of the virus or its existence or its fatality rate. You know, we can chip away at some of those things, but ultimately we are all vulnerable, and sitting in vulnerability is a really hard place to be. And it also makes it really hard to plan. You know, Ben just mentioned Gathering for Abundant Life, which is the name of, in our diocese, our plan for regathering our congregations. And you know, we put a lot of work into that plan, and I just had to have a meeting with the clergy basically saying, yeah, I don't know when anyone's going to be able to enter into phase 2 of this plan. Because when we made it up in April and early May, we thought that we'd be in a really different place at the end of June. So we have to consistently sort of stop, rethink, and change, which is the second part of that Serenity Prayer. You know, living one day at a time, enjoying one moment in time as the pathway to peace. You know, somehow just living in today and not freaking out too much about tomorrow or 2 months from now. Now, I think with campus ministry, that comes with some other things, because I know you guys are also trying to plan for a future that you don't know. You know, are you going to be on campus in the fall? Are you going to be online in the fall, or some combination? Are you, you know, if you're a student, you know, are you about to graduate into this Great Depression where no one will ever have a job and everyone will be living with their parents? You know, what, you know, I've seen a meme that was really funny about everybody in 2015 who was asked, what will you be doing in 5 years, was wrong. You know, that we have no way of predicting the future. But what I'm discovering as a leader is that you're in this bind where you're simultaneously preparing for everything and coming up with plans for what to do if this happens, and what to do if this happens, and what to do if this happens, while holding those plans lightly and not getting so attached to them that you can't leave them behind when things do change. So planning things that can be moved and changed and taken down and repurposed, and accepting that some of our efforts will be wasted. Like, some of the things that we plan for are just going to have to get checked. But also not giving into the inertia of not making any plans, of saying, well, since I don't know what's going to happen, I'm just going to sit here and wait for something to happen. When I think back of the most useful skills I learned in college, probably were improv, and I was a theater major, so I did a lot of that. I think if I looked at one thing in improv that I learned that was most helpful, it was the game Yes and. It was learning that when you're doing an improv scene and you say no, it ends the scene. But when you say yes and, it allows you to change the arc of the scene or change the focus and give it new energy in a way that doesn't stop the action. And I think right now in ministry, we're called to be yes and people. You know, do we have this horrible virus that is affecting every part of our daily life? Yes. And what are we going to do about that? You know, so yes, and the church is still the church. People still need community. People still need sacraments. People still need to know that their neighbor loves them. People still need ways to love their neighbor. How can we do all of those things in this context? And then the last quote I'll leave you with, Julian of Norwich gets a lot of attention in Christian circles for maybe her most famous quote, which is, all shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. And that is wonderful, and it kind of gives us hope in the midst of darkness somewhere, that it's all going to be okay. You know, God's got this. I don't have to fix everything. All shall be well. But the full quote, if you read it in her Showings of Divine Love, which I highly recommend, is a good spiritual text. What she said is, sin is necessary, and all shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. And I think sometimes we forget that sin is necessary part, that we're living in the midst of sin. And so her saying that all things shall be well is not a sort of glib crossing over of all the suffering and all the horrible things that are going on in life and were going on in her time as they are in our time. It is understanding that there is sin, and even with sin, even with suffering, even with evil, all shall be well with God. And so that is something that I hold on to and offer to you as something to hold on to, tide yourself over as you continue to figure out what the future is holding for you and your ministry. Thank you.